I started this event back in 2017. Our new home at the couch, create a space where people can just share a moment of their lives and not fear judgment, criticism, but feel very empowered to be as authentic, vulnerable, and real as they wanted to be. And we've all been there. You think you're all alone, you don't think anyone cares, you don't believe that anyone will understand, and you think that you can't get out. Right now, someone out there is going through exactly the same emotional process. Your circumstances are unique when you went through it, but the feeling of suck is very much the same. The loneliness, the guilt, the shame, all the dysfunctional stories in your head. Someone's going through that right now. I want to give a trigger warning. All the stories that you're going to hear tonight are personal in nature, and they can encroach on dark topics such as addictions, abuse, self-harm. And if you get triggered, please feel free to exit and take some time in the lounge. And then when you're ready, you can come back and join us at any point in time. I want to reflect back to our first speaker, Daniel, when he mentioned my dream. And I resonated with that because my dream growing up didn't really matter. And only recently did my dream matter because I decided this is what I choose to do. So I want to share a bit of good news that we were provided. Our producer at Shaw Cable said that we have been renewed for yet another year, which means I have to do this again for yet another year. I don't know if I can handle any more stories like this. But that's just testament to me with as little marketing as that we have, that they're resonating with this and they believe that this has value to the community. And the second thing I'll share with some of you who, well, maybe if you're not on our email list, you didn't get the update. Back in July, I registered VoiceStory as a nonprofit organization, and we are currently preparing the paperwork to register as a charity so we can take this work that we do and have the impact for future generations so they don't have to go through the pain and suffering and the crap that, well, I'm just going to speak for myself, that a typical good Asian boy that has five A's and a B, they don't have to go through that because there will be someone there to say, you know what, you're not seeing this because all you see is this. And my story of that report card was I ran home with a math test. 100% said big red ink, 100%. And I go, check it out, Mom. She goes, why didn't you do better? I'm like, it's 100%. She goes, you got the bonus question wrong. Do better next time. I don't want to see an X. I'm like, okay. And again, I wish someone older said, hey, Winston, go do some personal development and just let go of all that negativity and, you know, words will bounce off of you back onto your mom. It's not you. It's not you. And the one thing that I have read, and I've seen this meme come up over and over and over again, is when you criticize children, they don't stop loving you, they stop loving themselves. Which now explains why I hated myself so much. I have to thank my mom for that. I love her though. So let's continue. What happens when you choose not to tell the truth? Okay, how many people here have not chosen to tell the truth at one point in their lives? And how many people here have not chosen to tell the truth and actually had some really, really bad results of not telling the truth? Okay, I'll share mine, which I don't know if Daniel can relate to this story. I was goofing around with my sister and I was playing with the hammer, swinging it around, and the hammerhead fell off and smashed the TV. Right? We turn off the TV, we run away. Because what's going to happen, right? It's like, you know, Dad's never going to find out until he turns on the TV and sees the big crack down the screen. And all he said was, who did this? And I could feel the blood drained from my face. And I didn't say anything. And he took that as a lie. And as you well pointed out, there's these bamboo rods, about 3.5, 4 feet long, about the thickness of a pencil. And the training to tell the truth next time is 6 of those rods. You get beat one at a time, and if one breaks, another one goes. However long that lasts, and there's nowhere you can run because, well, you're in his space. That's the lesson of telling the truth that I grew up with, which then really, really magnifies the fact of why should I tell the truth? Because there's no good that can come from telling the truth. And if you want more examples of that, hit me up after the show, and I got tons of them, which will make your eyes bug out. But our next speaker, at one point in her life, chose not to tell the truth, and she will share what happens next. And I invite Jill Prescott to the stage.
In my family, it wasn't that we were taught that not telling the truth was a bad thing. It's just that we didn't really talk about things at all. Well, not the important things. We didn't talk about things like your feelings, not in the way of understanding what your feelings were and what they meant. We didn't talk about money, and we certainly didn't talk about sex. So as a child, when you grow up in a house that you don't talk about things like feelings and money and sex, is that they become taboo. And when a topic is taboo, what comes along with that is shamefulness, and that you're bad. That last part, that shamefulness and bad, that's what leads to not telling the truth. Because, as kids, we don't want to be bad. We don't want to be labeled as bad when we're little kids. That comes later when we're teenagers. But as children, we don't want to be labeled as bad. And in the house I grew up in, the adults that were around in my family and our extended family, they just didn't talk about things. They didn't share what was going on. And we had lots of fun. There was lots of great things that happened, and I watched the entire range of emotion. It's just that it was usually misdirected. And so again, no one was lying. It's just that no one was telling the truth. So in the summer of '76, when I was physically, emotionally, and sexually assaulted by a couple of older girls in the neighborhood, I didn't tell anybody. At 15, when I was raped while I was babysitting, neither myself nor the lady I babysat for said anything about the bloody sheets I'd stuffed in her closet. And when I ended up in the hospital at 16, bent over with abdominal pain, I refused to admit that I was sexually active. That last piece, I would pay a very high price for that in my life. The one thing that I knew to be true when I was a child was what I was going to do when I grew up. I knew for certain that I was going to be a mother and a wife. The mother part was the important part. I thought you had to be a wife to be a mother, so that's why I threw that one in there. I was that preteen and teenager that spent her weekends and her summers babysitting kids. I'd go to the family reunion and you'd find me on the ground with the little ones playing. I loved it. It was the one thing that I knew I would be good at. In truth, it was the only thing that I truly believed that I would be really good at. So that time when I was 16 and I woke up in the morning, bent over in tremendous pain, more cramping, more pain than I'd ever experienced in my life, I called for my mother. And she walked in the room and she took one look at me, laying there, sweating and pale and shaking, and she called for my dad. And my dad walked in and he said, "Jeannie, take her to the hospital." So off we went. And they put me in one of those private rooms, with the green curtain all around that no one could possibly hear anything that's going on behind it. And the doctor and my mom were in the room, and my doctor was asking a lot of questions, none of which I remember except for one. He asked me if I was sexually active. I said no, adamantly. And my mother said, "It's okay, you can tell the truth, you won't be in trouble." Come on. You really going to try to tell me I wasn't going to be in trouble for something that I'd been told was bad and shameful for all my life? I was not getting tricked into that. So I said no. Eventually, the doctor and my mom left the room, and a little while later, a nurse came in, and she was coming in to check my vitals. Didn't take her long to sit on the edge of my bed and take my hand and look me in the eyes and ask me the same question. And she said, "It's okay. I promise you won't be in trouble." And I have to tell you, I so desperately wanted to tell her the truth. But I couldn't. I just couldn't. And so they went in, the surgeon, and they removed my appendix. Afterwards, he said, "Well, there was actually nothing wrong with your appendix, but I don't know if you know this, but apparently your appendix is useless." So he said it would likely have to come out eventually, so they just took it. And once I'd recovered, there was no more pain, so all was well. Everything was great. A couple of years later, I was living with the man that I was actually having sex with when I wouldn't actually admit to being sexually active at 16. And one day I went to the doctor, and I was sitting in his office, and he said some really magical words. He said, "Jill, you're pregnant." I burst into tears. It was like the happiest day of my life. I couldn't believe this. I was going to be a mom. My dream was coming true. It was amazing. I knew I was going to have to tell my parents, and I knew it was going to be hard. My mother was a practicing Catholic, and quite frankly, she was already pissed that I was living in sin. But it had to happen. So off we went to my parents' place, and I said, "Mom and Dad, I have something that I need to tell you. I'm pregnant." I'll never forget the look on my dad's face. He lit up like a light bulb. He was thrilled, so freaking happy about this. It would be their first grandchild. And then my mom lost her shit. And she said things like, "This is going to ruin your life. And this is terrible." And she cried. I know that she loved me, and I know that it was an attempt to express her fear. And so when I left there, I was upset, of course, but nothing could have taken away how happy I was about being pregnant. 3 days later, I started to bleed. I grew up in a very small town, so we went to the local hospital, and they confirmed that I was having a miscarriage. And they sent me to the hospital in a bigger town so they could do what's called a D&C, where they clean out your womb. And on the way there, we stopped at my parents' place. I opened the door. My dad took one look at me, and he wrapped me in his arms while I wept. I have never felt that much pain. That was to be the first of 3 miscarriages. And the final one was what they call an ectopic pregnancy. It got stuck in my tube. And they let it go so long that it exploded. And so I lost that side. For the next 14 years, every month, I prayed. Through the end of that marriage, through the boyfriends in between, into the second marriage. The one thing I wanted more than anything in my life was to be a mother, to have a baby, to actually grow this child in my womb, and I wanted the whole experience. I wanted the big belly. I wanted the boobs that went with the big belly. I wanted to experience what it was like to give birth to a child. And so every month I prayed. I hoped. I bled. And I grieved. And this went on until I was 35 years old, when I finally went and found myself a good gynecologist. And this particular one specialized in infertility and difficult pregnancies. So they did this test. It's called a laparoscopy, where they put a scope in through your belly button, and they take a look around, see what's going on in there. Afterwards, in his office, when I was getting the news as to what was happening, it was a very challenging day. What he told me was that I had about a 5% chance of actually ever getting pregnant. And if I decided somehow to get pregnant, whether it was naturally or in vitro, the risk was much too high, that my life would be on the line. And then he dropped the bomb. Remember when I was 16 and I wouldn't admit that I was sexually active? Well, it turned out that that was actually my first ectopic pregnancy. That first time I was in the hospital, I was actually pregnant, and it was stuck in the tube, and it had caused scar tissue. On the other side, there was scar tissue already from them removing my appendix. So for all that time, there was very little chance of me getting pregnant, and quite miraculous that I ever had again. Not telling the truth at that age cost me the one thing I wanted more than anything in my life. Since that time, I've found a lot of grace and a lot of love in all of it. I've actually had a hand in raising some pretty amazing human beings. I am Mama Jill to a few of them, Aunt Jill to others. And there's some that I've just come into their lives for a season when they were struggling to help them through. And I'm still a mother to 4, none of who are living. I'd like you to ask yourself now what it is that you aren't telling the truth about in your life. It could be anything. Maybe you've experienced a trauma that you've buried and not talked about. Or perhaps you've caused someone else some pain. I know what that's like because hurt people. So after I'd done my healing, there were people I needed to apologize to. Or perhaps there's an area of your life that's messy. Money, your house, relationships. Whatever it is that you are not telling the truth about, it is holding you hostage in your own life. There's a very high cost. It's hurting your heart and most likely impacting your health. It doesn't have to be that way. You can change all of that. The one thing that came out of this for me is that I am a truth teller. I understand the impact of not telling the truth because I paid a very high cost for that. And now it is at the very center of the work that I offer in the world. I walk people through their secrets so that they can get to the light of truth on the other side. And so I'd like you to consider this right now an invitation, a permission slip, if you will, to tell the truth about your own life. It will change you. And so, my friends, find a way. Tell the truth and free yourself. Thank you.
Centrally located in the Richmond Auto Mall since 1984, Richmond Honda features a large selection of Honda-certified pre-owned vehicles. Inside the showroom, Honda's newest models are displayed for viewing, and the dealership is staffed 7 days a week for financial consultation. As Vancouver grows, so does the need for professional legal representation. With over 30 years of experience, Muldoon & Company offers initial consultation where your rights and options are explained to you with no obligation. Offices are located downtown in the Marine Building at 355 Burrard. Express Lane Auto Body is family-owned and operated with over 20 years of auto repair experience. The ICBC accredited body shop is located at 132nd and 78th Avenue in Surrey. Models are on display at Freeway Mazda. New Mazda sedans, crossovers, and SUVs surround the facility, and fully loaded versions occupy the floor of the showroom. At Freeway Mazda, 154th Street and 104 Avenue in Surrey.
Now I have the pleasure of inviting the only wizard that I know to the stage. The person that crafted those beautiful words that you saw at the beginning of the show, Tien Neo Eamas, and we're going to have a jam session about transcending gender.
Thank you.
So for those that, you can catch the video on our YouTube channel. We'll put that plug in. But what that clip was just a small segment of you describing how you were seen through your life. And maybe you can just fill in the crowd for that little bit that happened before in Singapore, I believe, back then.
In Singapore? Well, no, actually, if we, life in Singapore had not that much to do with the so-called trans experience that I had here. It was a completely different experience.
Okay, then correct me.
Okay, so I was born in Singapore in 1968 into a mixed race, mixed class, fundamentalist Christian family. And Singapore then was not the awesome super first world that we all watched in the Crazy Rich Asians movie last year. I know of people like that, and part of my family was of that class, but it was a very third world country at that point. And that was the environment I was born into. And I was given the gender identity or the gender label female. And that was life then. So I was treated as a girl and in a very strict abusive family. So life was, here's the really funny thing about it, right? People will always say to me, so when did you know you were different? And I always say, I was never different. I just was me. But as I lived my life, I noticed that I was treated a certain way that wasn't who me really was. I was treated like what they called a girl should be treated. And I went, but I'm just me. So I grew up in that environment. And that was life in Singapore. And then I did come here when I was 19.
Yeah, and the part of what you said that resonates, it keeps resonating in my head was how you were seen and showing us how to see. So you can see past what's in front of us. But when did you, I'm sure through your past, you have a lot of examples, but for someone who's learning to see, like myself, how do we consciously take these biases and learn to just put them on hold for just a little moment and see what's in front of us?
Very good. Thank you for that question. I think it's now after years of going through all the various abuse and violence and oppressions and, dealing with people's hatred and, all those kinds of things that humans do to each other when we're not being nice to each other. After decades of living that, I know that my passion really is exactly that, right? It's how do you connect with the soul in front of you. So I think most of that lesson did come between 2002 to about 2009. When I chose to transition in 2002, I was the first Asian trans man to transition in Vancouver in the then gay and lesbian community. Now, LGBTQ is hip as fuck now, right? Like everybody's transitioning, you got like a they, and I'm a he, and I'm a she, and I'm a non-binary, and I'm non-conforming. All of those crazy, awesome words are a great indicator of how far we've evolved to. Which is beautiful. And there's a lot more work to do, because now we're even giving even more labels to continue not being present.